My name's Lisa Salud. I'm the general partner of R3I Ventures. And I wear a couple of different hats in the ecosystem. I'm the entrepreneur in residence to the Australian and Canadian governments to soft land our deep tech assets in region. And of course, as a VC, hopefully to cherry pick them for investment. And also work as an adjunct faculty member at Singapore Management University, where I teach on digital transformation, masters versus robots. Where do we deploy the humans? Where do we deploy the robots? Where do we do it together? And also support the civil service government agencies, the 80 agencies of Singapore, and of course, the cyber risk governance of the Singapore Institute of Directors. So we have the great opportunity in our role in the ecosystem of supporting grassroots all the way through to the government agencies building the smart cities. And not just in Singapore, but in Luxembourg. We've built a digital fabric across the city of Luxembourg to land and expand our companies. And of course, also in Silicon Valley, where we are deep rooted. So really pleased to have the opportunity to invite you here today and to talk about the risks that we face as VCs and how we can play a more active role, both in mitigating the risks for our firms, but also in ensuring the safety of our assets.
Thanks, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here. So for those that don't know me, I'm a co-founder and CEO of Detection. We're an Australian cybersecurity startup. And I got to know Lisa through Pharmac Accelerate, where she was a mentor of ours when we expanded into the Singapore and Southeast Asian market.
Great. Now, Tan, we met because, as you know, besides the work that we do as an EIR in the ecosystem, we ourselves at R3I wanted to make sure that we weren't the weakest link for our investee companies. And obviously on the back of the recent cybersecurity regulatory changes in the region, the risks for any small medium enterprise in having a hack are significant. They are significant both in terms of loss of reputation and trust with our stakeholders and our families. But more importantly, they are a risk, of course, for our founders who often have spent 10 to 20 years in the trenches building deep scientific disruptive innovation, and we want to support the protection of that in terms of the information that is shared with us as their investor. We have a lot of risks in our business. First of all, whenever we do a deal, we are sharing a lot of data, not only internally, but also with our collaborating partners who are supporting us with due diligence. Second is we generally have a steady flow in this ecosystem of great interns from the world's best universities coming in and out of our firms, sharpening their saws, getting to understand the ecosystem in the industry. And we also have high volumes of really highly sensitive information, which is sometimes accessible by temporary stakeholders, either those that are syndicating with us where we agree to share due diligence, or in fact government agencies where we're co-investing in that particular asset. And like most small medium enterprises, we don't have huge realms of dedicated IT resources. So I was really excited to see what you guys had to offer, because we need to keep our operations lean, but we also need to keep them robust. So perhaps tell the audience more about Detection, why you do what you do, and how you could make a difference to a firm like ours.
We've looked a lot at modern workplaces. So we specialize in helping modern workplaces secure their third-party SaaS applications. So the G Suite, Office 365, Salesforce in the world, because what we see in every business, when it's a modern workplace, all the data is actually stored in third-party SaaS applications, and it's accessible through the web browser and by anybody that has been granted access to it. VC firms, I understand, are no exception, and hence we want to help VC firms as well as other modern workplaces where they have a lack of dedicated IT resources and knowledge to actually understand that risk better, and from that point, build a good baseline and upkeep their security posture over time.
The plethora of SaaS resources that we use seems to be growing on a daily basis. I think if I introduce another platform to my team, they're going to kill me. But it was incredible when I actually made the list of all the tools that we use on a daily basis, just how many we actually had and just how many risks that represented to the company. one of the things that was really enlightening to us is the average time to detection in Asia is more than 300 days. So we have to assume that the villains already live with us. And the question is when are they going to take action? And so with that concept in mind, we were really enthusiastic to deploy something across our SaaS network infrastructure that allowed us to both understand if we had data leakage, number one. Number two, whether or not we had single sources of weakness across the business, either directly or through our collaborating partners. And the other key area is making sure that we had constant oversight of identity and access controls. So did only the right people have access to the right data at the right moment? Because of course, deals come and go. And also many of our deals are controlled assets. So they have export controls, only certain nationalities can have access to them. And of course, I'm a global firm with operations in Australia, in Singapore, in Luxembourg, in Israel, in Canada, and in the US. And that makes it quite complex in order to create Chinese walls, if I could use that expression, between organizations and between deals in order to execute wisely. So tell us how you help me as a VC firm to address some of those key concerns.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of facets to it. But let me just start asking to understand a little bit better about the VC landscape. What SaaS platforms do VCs use in general?
Yeah, we often talk about that in our networks. I think the key aspects are PitchBook usually, or Preqin in terms of getting deal info, sometimes Crunchbase depending on the firm. We use a CRM, of course, which is usually Salesforce or Affinity. We are using typically Airtable in order to manage that deal flow pouring in as well. And we have across the firm Slack as co-working, like most parties do today. We generally use Google Mail in order to execute our own domain-based email. And of course, we use things like Mighty Networks, et cetera, to embed ourselves into various communities in which we deal source from. And of course, are connected to 50 other Slacks, which are our founders' applications, and backdoors into their networks through Slack as well.
So who usually manage these apps in your firm?
Sorry, the general partner typically.
Yeah.
Or in my case, I have an operations guy who helps me to, get us robust and consistent operationally. So while he has oversight, I guess I'm the other key critical user in the firm. And generally in terms of identity and access controls, I'm controlling who has access to what deal because I'm legally responsible.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So to answer the question you asked above, I mean, it's quite a big question. So first and foremost, we specialize in security risk governance for SaaS applications. So all the SaaS applications you mentioned earlier, they would fall within the realm of what our coverage for customers. And one thing I want to stress is we've got a unique tech on security because we want to focus on the business users.
Yeah.
Most security tooling or solutions are geared towards the people in the know, the security people. But the world of SaaS users are full of business people who procure and manage the SaaS applications themselves. Yeah. So to help companies like yourself, VC firms, our mission is to make that security simple so business users can care about it and get better at using all these good SaaS applications securely.
I guess that's one of the issues, right? So you tell me I have a problem and now I have to fix it with my team. And look, I have the best finance guys. I have the best deep tech technical guys, but do they really want to remediate, I don't know, two-factor authentication, for example? Of course we have to. But the question is there a way to do that more expediently? Because often when we're working on deals, they're time sensitive and we're in a time compressed situation. So yeah, tell me more about what you have today, what you can do for our firm, and secondly, what the roadmap looks like moving forward.
So first and foremost, when it comes to SaaS applications, because the way they're decentralized and the user base can change pretty quickly, it's hard to keep up with changes and not to know, and it's hard to understand where you sit in terms of your security posture. So first and foremost, we bring your risk profile to front of mind. So you know where you sit as a VC firm. So let me just share with you a quick slide. So privileged access is about knowing who your admins and your super admins are, because they are the ones that can delete, add, change your configuration and data and so on and so forth. So it's very important to know who they are. And when you have a lot of changes in your user base, for example, you can add contractors that might have privileged access to a certain app, but you don't need them over time. It's important to know who they are to cut them off, right? It's also important to avoid having too many of them, because it might lead to a problem with excessive privileges as well. Do you have, is for VC firms, do you have any issues keeping track of who your admins and your global admins are across different platforms?
Look, generally no, because the general partner, or certainly at our firm, the general partner and the ops person lead that responsibility. But I guess the key issue is always around who has access to what deal when. The geopolitical landscape is quite rapidly moving. And at one point, it didn't matter if you had, for example, Chinese and American money on the cap table. And then suddenly with the Trump era, it really mattered. And that actually represented some key issues for us, especially around our export controlled assets, especially if you're taking government grants in that company at the early stages. So that privileged access as to who has access to what, where, and what nationality they are became really important. And that is something that we have to track very closely.
Mm. So the next item we look at is authentication. So do your users log in securely? For example, with multi-factor authentication or via your corporate identity provider like G Suite and Office 365, because the identity provider can verify who they are. And MFA is seen as the most effective way to prevent account compromise attacks as well. Do you see that you can get a good grasp of whether MFA is enforced across a user base?
We didn't until we implemented Detexi, that's for sure. I honestly had no idea who had implemented it and who hadn't, except for if I had gone into the settings of each of those SaaS applications. And the other key issue we have is we are trying to drive an inclusive work culture. And many of our team are really senior. You know, they've been in the business for 40 years. And their general technology appetite to take on more platforms is somewhat limited, because they are already using so many platforms in their everyday. And so making it really difficult for them to log in often means that they're not going to use it, right? And we want them to use our applications because we need them to institutionalize the knowledge or the process that they've gone through, especially because that becomes a record of discovery for the fund. And so I don't want to make exceptions because someone doesn't want to use multi-factor authentication. But, you know, sometimes I feel compelled to make exceptions, right? But of course I can't, because I have legal and regulatory obligations and governance obligations. But this is certainly useful to help me understand what kind of risk culture I'm building and how I need to cross the divide with some of my team.
Mm. The next one is user access, which is essentially knowing who's got access to which SaaS apps, right? Because we often find that that SaaS platforms have external users, sometimes short-term contractors, consultants that can access your sensitive data. And it's important to know if they still require access. And external users might have access to very, very high level sensitive data. And they often reuse passwords and frequently not in scope for controls. Yeah. And they may not have sufficient contractual liabilities either to your organization in the event of a breach.
Yeah, and I think that's something that everyone is sensitive to with GDPR and, of course, with the PDPA here in Singapore, and the legal responsibilities that go with the protection of our data. You know, thinking about a fine of $1 million on a small medium enterprise where you're taking a 2% management fee, that's a large chunk of operational coverage, right? And it's not just a large chunk of operational coverage that you would lose, but it's also that loss of trust and loss of faith with the ecosystem that you might want to invest in, and of course the partners that may want to invest in you. So this is a really key concern for us, that identity access controls, and also just in terms of general operational efficiency. I don't want to be paying for users that don't use my systems.
Yeah. And next item is business email. So when we tend to think business email compromise as phishing, right? So that is a given, and a phenomenon that's happening everywhere in the world. But what's often overlooked is something called user-created email forward rules. So users in your, let's say your G Suite and your Office 365 can often create automatic forward rules to forward corporate emails to personal email addresses. And we've seen this since the start of COVID as a new threat vector. So the SANS Institute, which is one of the biggest organizations for cybersecurity training, was actually a victim of external mail forward rules. Is this something that you've thought about before we approach you?
Well, we invest in cybersecurity, so the answer, of course, is yes.
Mm.
You would hope so, right? But look, I think the key point about this is being able to monitor that in real time. Before, we had huge information asymmetry, because how would I know if someone had these rules in place unless I was digging deep into the systems? And sometimes the systems don't give you that level of analytics either. So having transparency where those mail forwards exist, I think is really very helpful. And in particular, when you're using third-party contractors, that's a really big one for us, especially around data leakage.
Mm. Talking about data leakage, data sharing. VCs share a lot of documents, I understand.
Yes.
So we like any other modern workplace, will also share documents, but we're very cautious about who we share it with, how long we share it for, to whom we share it, right? So can you give us a bit of more insight into how VCs keep this under control?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. Once again, having a look in your G Suite, admin analytics is one thing, but doing that across every single SaaS app that you use, that's a lot of time invested. And I'm certainly not doing that on a daily basis. So the fact that you could automate that for me and tell me where the data is being shared, how many links we do have out there that are accessible to anyone clicking that link, and on what data point, I think is really, you can't imagine, that's unbelievably useful for us. And it's also really important around understanding the internal risks. There was a report put out by EY a couple of years ago that said 4% of the people will come to work for you purposely to deliver harm. And that means that actually you could be hiring someone who is a bad actor, and having that early transparency, I think, is very helpful for us as a small business.
Thank you. So we just touched on the 5 key categories that we do continuous assessment and provide continuous oversight for our clients. So privileged access, authentication, user access, and so on and so forth, and tell them where they are, where they sit. And with a simple, for example, why we place authentication as critical is because you have one privileged user that has MFA turned off. So that's a simple action point to move from a red to a good by simply turning on MFA for that privileged user. I just want to dig a bit deeper into data sharing oversight as well, because I think it's an important point that you mentioned. Data sharing is powerful for the modern workplace, because you do want to harness that to collaborate internally and externally. But what we find is there's always a large volume of externally shared files and drives in big companies or in high transactional funds or companies like yourself that are often overlooked over time, right? So, and we want to give that visibility back to the people who share the data, in terms of knowing how many how many files are currently being still shared, who can access them. Is it the world that can access them, or is it a few people? And do you know who they are? So we tell you who they are as well. And we also tell you the number of files that have not been shared, but have not been looked at or modified or reviewed, because you might not need them anymore. right? So having this data visibility helps you prioritize and help you know where you whether there's presence of excessive sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And also, you know, the VC firm at a partner level doesn't have very heavy attrition rates, but certainly on the associate and analyst levels, we do, right? Because generally, the people are here to get experience for a certain period of time. And partnership opportunities don't always open up so rapidly. As you probably know, in Singapore, people change jobs purposely every 2 years to get a 10% increase in salary. It's kind of an ecosystem thing that the HRs have trained this ecosystem if you want a salary increase. And so we kind of plan for the fact that at a junior level, people in the firm may turn over every 2 years. And this is really important for us to have transparency around what data is shared and what data is protected.
Mm. And beyond that, configuration drifts because users change, people come and go. And so we do give our clients the ability to understand what's changed over time ongoingly.
Yeah, and GitHub is a big one for us, especially as a deep tech VC firm. Quite often we're doing deep technical due diligence on an asset, and they will share also their GitHub access with us. So implementing this for our own GitHub platforms, as well as, of course, our third-party platforms, is actually quite useful. And we can even potentially run detection throughout a due diligence process to see how secure that company's assets really are. And this is particularly interesting, especially when a company's IP is in that manufacturing process, for example. And so therefore they are most likely subject to external actors wanting to get access to the asset. We can implement that inside of the due diligence process to see just what kind of security controls they have in place and perhaps what level of investment should be needed in the future in order to keep our assets safe.
Mm. And you did ask a question about, if I recall, we'd identify the issues, do we fix them as well, right? Because given your lean IT resources, you might not have the time to do everything. Yeah. So first and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, we are business user focused, and we understand that it's the business users that manage and procure SaaS applications. So what we do to help is whenever we see an issue, we come up with very simple instructions, remediation instructions to help them fix the issue themselves, because it's simply logging into a platform and do that, turning on MFA for a user. But we're also planning to introduce what we call automatic remediation in the near term. So when you see an issue highlighted, we will give you the option to remediate it automatically. So if you see, let's say, a highly privileged user or super admin in G Suite, that's MFA turned off, we can give you the option to turn it on automatically. Or if there's a number of files that have been shared for a long time and you don't need them to be shared anymore, the option to turn them off.
Yeah, honestly, just having a look at my old cybersecurity days and looking at those remediation reports, right? You've got so many things that you have to remediate as a company. And you do need to invest in specialized technical resources in order to do that. And that can be a challenge, right? It can be a challenge if you want to do that in-house, because getting a work permit in this current moment is an extremely difficult thing to do if the local ecosystem where you work doesn't have readily available talent. And the second aspect of that is that even if you do get the talent to fix it, if that's a considerable investment because the talent is scarce, if we can do that far more financially efficient, I think most GPs would appreciate the opportunity to keep their overheads low.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. You know, it took us a very rapid amount of time to implement this, I think less than 30 minutes, which was really impressive. And I did it myself with you, which is even more impressive. You know, the average VC doesn't have huge technical competencies, and that was a really positive thing and a positive experience for us. Is that normal? Is that your average implementation, or was R3I a rare case?
No, that's actually, we have significantly even reduced the time that we onboard SaaS solutions lately. When we help you onboard, that actually took longer than currently the case. It's like I said, because we want everything to be simple. We have now turned everything or working towards a two-click onboarding process. So if
Okay.
you want to add Office 365, G Suite, or Salesforce, or the like to our portal for monitoring, it's a click. So you can go to a marketplace, you can go to an app and click on it. We haven't got it for all the other platforms, but that's the near future for us. Like business users, they don't like, I think SaaS platforms are supposed to be intuitive. So
Yeah.
when you use it, you actually don't need training. You want to be able to see it, believe it, and then just use it, right? So the 30 minute that we help you onboard your SaaS applications, we can bring it down to 10 minutes at the moment. And
Wow.
that's across the board, not just for you, but for all the other platforms. Yeah.
And the other reason, I mean, did you just give us a great price because we were once your entrepreneur in residence and you felt you had to? Or is it pretty cost effective for most VCs to implement?
We want to be able to make it really flexible for anybody to implement our solutions, right? Because I think first and foremost, you need to be able to know your baseline. And so the solution starts from a few $100s a month, $500 a month, all the way to $2,500, depending on the features and what you need. So if you only want your risk posture reporting and what to do to go from red to green, it's $500 a month, and there's no obligation. You can sign up for it monthly, you can sign up for it yearly. The idea is to make it very accessible to people, to the SMBs and the mid-market, so people can start looking after their security.
Now, I immediately thought of my portfolio, right? Because of course, we're dealing in deep tech assets that are export controlled, and we want to make sure those assets are safe. And this is an opportunity for us to add value as a VC. If you think about all the different sectors that Detexion best supports, what does the ideal portfolio company look like for us in order to be able to deliver that real value?
SaaS modern workplaces, which I think would probably cover a lot of the players in the market right now. But what we tend to find is companies that are in financial services and fintech are the most prolific users of SaaS applications. They're very quick to adopt SaaS, and they actually embed SaaS applications in their business processes as well. So in Singapore, for example, we resonate very well with MAS licensed companies and fintech certified SFA, fintech certified organizations, because MAS recently released an updated technology risk management guidelines, and Detexion is just the automated process for you to get to do SaaS risk review and reporting, as well as audit function, as well as oversight. And in Australia, for example, the whole financial services industry is regulated by APRA. And we resonate really well with fintech companies as well and financial services organizations, because they have the obligations now to provide proof of security controls for the critical assets. And most of their critical information assets are SaaS applications. So in the past, you tend to look at cybersecurity from a endpoint perspective, from your antivirus, from your network defense and all that. But what's often overlooked these days at the modern workplace is your sensitive data is only stored in the 10 to 20 SaaS applications that pretty much all your users have access to.
Yeah,
so what to do from that perspective? I mean, you need to know how your users use and interact with SaaS platforms. Are your users are really the users you want in the platforms? Right. Yeah. So that's the modern workplace security aspects that Detexion specializes in.
Now, I completely see the opportunity in fintech, but I also see the opportunity in any regulated industry or any SME that has to report to a multinational corporation customer. And I think about many of the collaborating partners that we work with in the insurance industry, who are really a mixed breed of broker dealers, agencies, joint venture partners, having oversight of their cybersecurity posture is really fundamental. I remember talking to one of my insurance collaborators who forecasted that they would lose 40% of their distribution channels due to non-GDPR compliance, because their networks are SMEs and they just don't have the security in place. Could you be a silver bullet potentially for the insurtech and insurance industry?
You made a very important point there. And I think this is, I mean, from a startup perspective, this is how big the market can be, right?
Mm.
So apart from helping the mid-market and SMBs look after their security posture and getting better at optimizing their SaaS applications, there's a big industry that's growing and desperately needs data. So when talking about the cyber insurance market here, so it's supposed to grow from 7 billion, which is today, to 25 billion in a few years, in 4 years. Now, currently, the loss ratio is really high for cyber insurance. It's almost, I think, 25% in, is it 25? Oh, don't quote me on this, 25% in the US, 30% in the US, right? And so the reason for such big losses is because it's so concentrated into only a few players, big enterprises that can pay the insurance bills. So high concentration in large enterprises. And at the same time, there's a lack of data for the underwriters to assess the controls and the premiums. So where we think we can really revolutionize this market is to give the underwriters the ability to understand how to open up a new market segment, SMEs, reduce the concentration, offer insurance policies, cyber insurance to more of the SMEs in the mid-market to diversify that risk. And at the same time, we will provide the data, the much needed data feed in terms of how the clients look after their cybersecurity from a SaaS perspective, right? So how simple controls like MFA, like privileged access, we can hand that data feed over to the underwriters. So what it does is the underwriters would be able to price the premiums better and adapt the loss claims and the pricing to their clients, and at the same time making insurance policies more accessible to the SMEs and mid-market. So it's a very exciting opportunity that we're working on, and we're doing a couple of pilots now. So one with Pharma Accelerate, so IAG, the largest insurance company in Australia and New Zealand, and also another pilot in New Zealand with one of the bigger banks, one of the biggest banks there. So we're really excited to see how this market pans out.
So does this mean that you're going to be the cybersecurity assurance to a cybersecurity insurance product?
I think there are a couple of ways to go about this, right? So at the moment, we can experiment being the assurance partner to a cyber insurance policy, a cyber insurance vendor. But we could also become almost a third-party SaaS ecosystem, if you like. So whenever you need to know your counterparty security risk, you can refer to us, right? So we can provide data feed to all sorts of parties that need to understand a third party's security risk.
In fact, we just had this conversation the other day. We spend so much time screening personnel, right? Because we want the people to come into our firm to be good actors. And there was a conversation to be had that said, actually, soon everyone will be carrying their own cybersecurity risk posture score that is like a credit score that goes with you wherever you go. And that cybersecurity risk score will basically be the differentiator between whether or not you can get a job or you compete against the person beside you going for the same job. And I thought that was a really interesting notion. And what you're suggesting here is that the company in its consolidated view has a risk score. And that risk score will determine whether or not you do or don't compete for that RFP and win the bid, because you are potentially a weak link to the overall global multinational corporation that you could be bidding for. That's a really interesting notion. And I think certainly many of our SME companies, if they were able to have a competitive advantage because they were more hardened than their competition, especially when selling into regulated industries, I think that could be quite interesting.
I think security assurance is the future, Lisa. I think right now it only applies to regulated entities, like the big boys and the big companies and all that. But to do business in the new world, you need to be able to provide your customers with the confidence that you can look after your own data, right? And to do that at the moment is some sort of third-party certifications that only happen periodically or yearly. Or what if there is a system to continuously provide you with that data feed, right? You can just go in and check. So the whole credit, the whole banking world is based on credit scoring system for individuals. We
Yeah.
can have that for organizations, for SMEs, right? Counterparty risk, cybersecurity, SaaS applications. I mean, the whole world is so interlinked now. And supply chain risk, a lot of it is burden upon the third parties to prove that they're not the weakest link, right?
Yes. So, I'm really excited by what you say, Tan, both in terms of, using you for our own business, using you for our portfolio companies, but also the potential of your exit. I had the opportunity to do an IPO back in 1997, just to show you my age. We built OneTel from 97 to 2000 to be a major player in the Australian ecosystem on the telco front. And I went from there to TrueSecure, which was the largest cybersecurity company in the world on the back of our merger with Uberzen and Be Trusted. And the thing that really made them famous, and the thing that made the clients famous that used TrueSecure, is that every time you implemented, which was what you describe, a life cycle risk management system, the customer would have TrueSecure certified all over their website. Does that mean soon R3I Ventures, in order to be able to compete for LP money, in order to compete for great investment opportunities, could potentially have Detexion certified on our website? Is that something that you will deploy as a brand equity builder and reputation builder for your own firm? And is that something that we could use to give us an edge out there in the market?
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure we won't be the only one doing that in the future, right? I'm pretty sure the whole world is turning towards understanding uh, true counterparty risk, and we definitely can help firms like yourself to do that, and we're doing that already. And I think the reward is really for people who want to do that proactively right now, because a lot of firms that we see do it reactively.
Yep.
But our clients, most of them are bigger organizations, and they're ISO certified. They also SOC 2 Type 2 compliance. What we see different in what they do versus others that are quite behind is their proactivity towards security posture management. Now, SaaS, this market didn't exist 2 years ago. So when we first conceptualized the idea of helping companies using SaaS to use them securely and in terms of configuration, didn't exist 2 years ago, right? And then October last year, Gartner actually solidified this and defined this market as SSPM, SaaS Security Posture Management. It's actually the younger brother of actually not too old, but a relatively new market called Cloud Security Posture Management as well. Which are about making sure that you can use the clouds, the public clouds, AWS, GCP, and Azure securely.
Yeah.
Between 2015 and 2018, there was a big hype about cloud usage, cloud sprawl. And 2018, a whole bunch of companies that pioneered and that got acquired.
Yeah.
And so the next market naturally is SaaS. And we didn't think that would come that soon, but there you go. We're working in a defined market category.
And just on the back of that, how big is this market?
Wow. SaaS is the biggest segment of the cloud, right? $70+ billion spent on SaaS applications. 74% of SMBs use SaaS applications, right? Yes. So if you just think about, we did a bottom-up analysis on the willingness to pay proof points that we've got, in our key four markets: the US, the UK, Singapore, and Australia, New Zealand. And we think the serviceable available market is about 1.8 billion just on SSPM. Now, we haven't talked about the adjacent market, which is the cyber insurance market, right? Which is supposed to go from 7 to 25 billion in a few years. So we're hoping to piggyback on that growth as well.
Wow, really exciting. Really excited to be your customer, most importantly. Great to see you grow up into this space. And really excited to learn more about your InsurTech agenda as you move forward. And most importantly, how you can help us differentiate among the crowd of voices currently raising capital, and also how we can be seen as a strong actor to supporting our portfolio companies. So thanks so much for your time today. Let's keep the conversation going. Maybe we can open it out to the floor, and if anyone has some questions, we can get them answered here today.
Yeah, so just a bit of a pitch here. I mean, we do offer 14-day free trials for anybody who would like to check out the platform and for us to generate a security posture report for them.
Awesome. It's certainly how we got to know you and why we got hooked. Because until you see the data in front of you, you really don't know what your security posture is. So yeah, I found that really helpful. I also loved your move to monthly pricing, which I think for most small, sub $100 million funds is very helpful. And especially for our portfolio companies that are, seed coming through to Series A, every dollar counts as they move from one milestone to the next. So it certainly makes it more appealing. Do you have any questions from the floor? Here, I've got one question for you, Andy. Sorry, Tan, you are a team of how many, and what is your vision for the growth of your company?
We are a team of 8 at the moment, Melbourne-based. The vision is to democratize what we do and really make it accessible globally. I mentioned the key 4 markets for us. So we're looking to set up our sales capabilities in Singapore in Q2 and the US as well. And we really can see this take off. We've got a lot of exciting inquiries from partners who can help us scale. Lots of security consultants, cloud consultants that see the opportunity to go up the value chain and get and offer value-added services to their customers.
Really exciting. And so you're not scaling directly, you're scaling globally, indirectly. And I hear you started in the US, right? You're out of Stanford, if I remember. You're an alumni of mine.
Yes, correct. Yeah, my background was business, investment banking, private equity, actually. So kind of similar, but not similar. Before I went to Stanford, and really was mesmerized by how SaaS everything the whole world out there was, right? And I think that was when I started getting interest in cybersecurity. And after 12 months working on a cybersecurity idea that wasn't for SMBs, there were a lot of insights I gained from it, which is SaaS. And for me as a business user, I can relate to SaaS applications really well. So it was almost natural for us for me to go into to understand and dig more into SaaS applications and how to help business users use them more securely.
So what I really loved recently is you give us access to data that helps us make smarter decisions about our cybersecurity risk posture. But you two also implemented some human analytics in your firm, Fingerprint for Success, to help you scale more effectively.
That was an eye-opener. Yeah, that was definitely an eye-opener. Yeah.
Building and scaling a team out of Australia is no mean feat in the middle of COVID-19 in a world of immobility. How are you scaling into the US at this moment?
So the US at the moment, we're doing a lot of trials and errors. So we haven't actually, we've got a couple of proof points. So trial customers out of the West Coast, financial services companies as well. And we got them through lead generation and as well as referrals from our network. So there's a lot of learnings there in terms of how fast I think US customers are willing to give a new tool, a new solution, a trial, and the assessment process can be very quick and very informative. What we just think the US is a massive opportunity for us because the language of SaaS is almost universal over there. People get it. Whereas, you see other parts of, let's say, Southeast Asia, it's not quite the same yet. And so the good thing about the US is actually leading in terms of there are a few players that are helping us spread the market awareness there in the US as well. Albeit they're famous on the enterprise, they're focused on the enterprise end of town. So for us, it's about scaling the market with knowing who the trusted advisors of the SMBs and mid-markets are. And I think a channel strategy will play to that.
Fantastic. Well, great to talk to you today, Tan, and look forward to catching up soon.